In this video, I will talk about why consistency mattered more than the scale. When most people start trying to lose weight, the first thing they focus on is the scale, and that makes sense. It's the only clear number you can see. But for me, very early on, I realised something important. The scale was useful, but it was also dangerous. In the very early months, I weighed myself weekly. At that stage, weight was coming off fairly consistently, so the number made sense. But after 3 or 4 months, things slowed down. Not because I was doing anything wrong, not because the process had stopped working, just because that's what happens. And I noticed something. Even when I felt better, more energy, less breathless, clothes fitting looser, the number on the scale didn't always reflect that. That's when I changed how often I weighed myself. I moved to monthly weigh-ins, not because I was avoiding the truth, but because I didn't want one data point to override everything else that was improving. The scale measures weight, it doesn't measure health, it doesn't measure fitness, it doesn't measure how your body is adapting. And if you let it dominate your thinking, it can undo a good week in about 5 seconds. What had mattered more than the number was this: I was still showing up, I was still training, I was still eating reasonably well, I was still feeling better overall. Consistency became a form of protection, because when you behave the same way, regardless of feedback, you stop chasing short-term validation and start building something longer term. I didn't need to feel motivated every week. I didn't need the scale to reassure me constantly. I just needed to keep doing the same basic things. That's where consistency beats the scale. It removes emotion from the process. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that weight loss should show up first. For me, it didn't. What showed up first was better energy, less breathlessness, better sleep, clothes fitting differently, feeling physically more capable. Those things happened before the scale reflected them. And this is where a lot of people quit. Not because it's not working, but because they're looking in the wrong place for proof. Fat loss often lags behind behavioural change. If you stop just because the scale pauses, you often stop right before the body catches up. I never went into this thinking speed was important. This wasn't about looking good quickly. It wasn't about a short-term goal. It was about aging better. And aging well isn't something you rush. It's something you build slowly, quietly, and repeatedly. If I'd chased speed, I'd have chased extremes. And extremes don't last. Consistency lasts. When the scale slowed, I didn't panic. I didn't quit. I didn't change everything. I just kept going. Because even when weight loss slowed, I still felt better. And that was enough to know it was worth continuing. The mistake people make is thinking the process only works if the scale is constantly rewarding them. For me, the reward was how I felt living my life. Even now, I still track metrics, but not obsessively. The scale is one tool, not the judge. I'm more interested in how I feel day to day, how my body responds to routine, whether my habits are still in place. Consistency tells me more about my health than any single number ever could. If there's one thing that carried me through slow weeks, stalled months, and long stretches with no visible change, it was this: why I started. Not motivation, not discipline, not willpower, just a clear reason. Consistency is easy when you don't argue with yourself every day. You show up because that's who you are now, not because you're chasing a number. The scale tells you what happened. Consistency determines what happens next. If you focus only on the scale, you'll quit early. If you focus on consistency, the scale eventually follows. And more importantly, so does your health.